This is Finextra at Cybos, and I'm here on the MasterCard stand this afternoon with Mike Angus, who's the Global Head of Payment Strategy for MasterCard. Mike, can you tell us a little bit about the concept of card rails?
Certainly. Card rails are sort of a broad term that we use to describe the infrastructure that MasterCard has and runs its payments over. So it includes the physical network that we have, the quite simple network actually, because it's all hub and spoke around one location, but it also includes the rules, the standards that we enforce, all of the participants that we have, the 20,000 plus banks, the 30 million plus endpoint merchants, and it's all of those together that we describe as the card rails and everything that goes with it.
The relevance of MasterCard to consumer payments is clear to everybody, but what can transaction banks gain from the concept of your card rails infrastructure?
A lot, and we initially got into commercial payments on top of very retail-like products. So T&E was the first step into commercial payments, and that was basically just offering travelers a way to pay for food and beverage and lodging with a card that they'd be used to doing if they were doing it as tourists. Then we progressed into purchasing cards, which allowed you to pick up things like staples and paper easily and controllably, and then we started to move into getting more and more offerings that were commercial specific. So that's all card focused. What we've realized recently is there are lots of problems that transaction banks are trying to solve for their corporate customers, some of them domestic, some of them cross-border, where our rails could give them advantages in some specific situations. Our rails have the ability to associate a lot of information with a payment. Our rails have a single global structure, so it's a little bit simpler. Our rails have this global set of rules that everybody participates in, and in some payment situations, those are big advantages for transaction banks when they're building solutions for their corporate customers.
Do you have much uptake from transaction banks starting to use these card rails?
So, many transaction banks have been recently doing two things: growing their commercial card business, and it's originally mostly T&E cards, P cards, and now migrating into other form factors. But we're getting a lot of uptake in trying to think of how they can use our rails in different ways to solve their problems. So we're getting both. We're getting a lot of growth in the classic commercial card business, and a lot of interest in how we can develop new ways of approaching old problems in transaction banking with our rails.
Can you tell us a little bit about the major innovations you're expecting to see in card-based payment networks and beyond?
Card-based networks, or in broader? So I'm going to probably talk about both, because we talk about payments as really competing against each other. In card-based networks, how we partner with other participants. Banks have been our partners for a long, long time, and card-based companies, certainly us, are now having to partner with mobile networks operators, with merchants, with payment service providers that aren't fully banks but are actively participating. We're also having to partner with the new people who are coming in and disintermediating parts of the payment value chain. So one of the things is the growth of partnering across different parts of the payment ecosystem. But specifically in terms of things that are going to happen, mobile is what everybody talks about. I think that's it's going to have a big impact on retail payments. It's going to have a big impact on wholesale payments as well, both as a way to access traditional payment types and maybe even some new payment types as well. Beyond that, I think the march of everything digital is something that card companies, card rails, are going to have to get their hands around. So more and more is becoming virtual. More information is available about the transactions and to associate with the transactions. And then I could go on in retail things as well.
MasterCard recently published its most recent Mobile Payments Readiness Index, and it was interesting to see that Japan, where Cybos is being held for the first time, ranked 6th in that index. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, the Mobile Payment Readiness we created to try and help both us and other players in mobile understand which countries were closest to adopting mobile payments. And we put a whole bunch of factors into it. Some of it was primary market research. We went out and talked to consumers in every country, asked them what they thought about mobile payments, whether they use mobile payments. We looked at infrastructure that was in place. We looked at the financial institutions. We looked at the regulators and tried to understand whether they were supportive of mobile payments or resistant to mobile payments. We looked at how well banks and networks and mobile companies were partnering to form mobile payment clusters. combined all of those into a single index. There were a lot of discussion about what the relative weights would be and what data we should use for each, and came up with the rankings. So there's a couple of things that just characterize the whole index. Nobody is very high. So this is a scale of 0 to 100, and nobody's over 50. And we think 60 is probably the inflection point above which people are just about to really be big participants in mobile payments. So nobody is over 50 even. I think the second thing is there were some surprises in placing. Japan's had mobile payments for as long as anybody, and have a lot of experience with it, and yet they weren't at the top of the list. Kenya, a company who's had mobile payments relatively shortly, ranks a couple of places above Japan. They've just adopted mobile payments much more rapidly for a whole variety of reasons. But it's really that combination of things that has Japan placed where they are. Very near the top. The technical infrastructure is very advanced. A lot of experience with mobile payments. Some of the partnerships haven't evolved as much as we thought before. So they're near the top, but not quite at the top, which was Singapore.